Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 5:30 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Jeanelle Slade. Well, COVID-19 testing moves into high gear across Bighorn County as the first of 2 mass test sites open to the public today. A busy day at Crow Agency, where state and tribal governments hope to test at least 800 people to get a baseline reading of COVID-19 spread in their community. But first, some breaking news. Just 30 minutes ago, Bighorn County confirmed 3 more positive cases of COVID-19. A woman in her 20s, a man in his 20s, and a boy under 10 years old were all asymptomatic. All were tested last week. Now back to today, Montana Governor Steve Bullock was in Crow Agency to get a sense of the operation, and Q2's Mitch Laggy takes us to that voluntary drive-up testing.
A site that's become familiar over the past few months. Cars lined up with passengers waiting to be tested for COVID-19. The site here in Crow Agency was open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Wednesday. It was staffed by the Montana National Guard, along with Bighorn County and Crow tribal officials. Tomorrow, the group will move down the road to Hardin during the same time, giving COVID-19 tests for free. A proactive approach compared to a reactive one that was seen earlier in the year.
Where we're trying to see how far has the virus spread in our community. It'll give us a baseline for going forward, too, to sort of see how the virus might come into a community.
At 5 p.m. Wednesday, 3 new cases of COVID-19 were identified in Bighorn County. The patients were asymptomatic and found through recent testing events like this one. The drive-up test site was implemented through conversations with the Crow tribe and Montana Governor Steve Bullock's office. Local staff from Indian Health Services and other agencies helped perform the tests.
For all of them to collaborate together, it's perfect, because that's unity at its best. Despite which party you're with, it doesn't matter. Right now, it's for the people.
A similar surveillance test site was used 2 weeks ago with the Fort Belknap Reservation. Bullock said the hope is to bring more testing to Montanans because resources are now more widely available than they were earlier in the year.
But I'm comfortable that we've now gotten in line, both private and public, the resources that we need to test people along the way, and just really encouraging folks to get out and get tested.
Now, the Sentinel COVID-19 testing site was a true community effort between local, tribal, and state officials, something that Montana Governor Steve Bullock hopes will continue in the future. Reporting in Crow Agency, Mitch Laggy, MTN News.
All right, thanks so much, Mitch. And again, 3 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Bighorn County tonight. And as Mitch mentioned, the testing operation will be in Hardin tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the Hardin High School. Bighorn County residents just need a valid ID, home address, and current phone number. Well, some people have tried to draw comparisons between COVID-19 and influenza, but with the United States reaching more than 100,000 COVID-related deaths, health experts say it is clear that COVID has a far more devastating impact. The CDC has estimated there were at least 24,000 deaths related to influenza during the recent flu season in the U.S., and more than 35,000 died from COVID in the last month alone. Montana hasn't been hit nearly as hard as the rest of the nation, with the state just announcing the 17th death. Now, there have been 26 deaths related to influenza in state. State health officials say a key point to understand about the 2 viruses is that we have the tools to effectively combat influenza. All we have is social distancing for COVID-19.
Well, there isn't a vaccine for COVID-19. There isn't an antiviral treatment that's readily available like there is for influenza, which is Tamiflu. We definitely are seeing nationwide more people who are infected and hospitalized with, with deaths included due to COVID compared to influenza.
Well, Montana has also seen a much smaller number of COVID cases, even compared to our neighboring states. The state is currently at 45 cases per 100,000 people. Idaho, Wyoming, and the Dakotas are all at least 3 times that. Well, Wyoming health authorities announcing late this afternoon 1 more person has died from COVID-19, bringing the state total to 14 deaths. As of tonight, there are 653 confirmed cases. Well, this as Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon delivered a mix of news to residents of the Cowboy State today. He says beginning June 1, the state will ease restrictions on public gatherings and allow outdoor events of up to 250 people. But he also announced the 6 biggest rodeos and celebrations in the state are canceled. Scott will have more on that coming up in sports. Well, Riverstone Health here in Billings announced today COVID-19 testing will soon start in Yellowstone County. All the senior care facilities will contact residents and their family members about an effort to test all residents and staff. Recently, Governor Steve Bullock directed the state to expand testing to include all residents and employees, even if they have no symptoms. Well, the Billings Symphony is tuning up to hold live performances at 8 of the senior living homes around Billings. The trio started performing today at Highgate Senior Living. They then moved on to Sweetwater Retirement, Morning Star Senior Living, and then onto West Park Village. Billings Symphony Education Director Candy Holzer says, quote, "We are hoping to enrich the residents' lives through music with our little tour." Well, tomorrow, the members of the symphony will visit the Springs in the morning, the Legacy Windstone, and Eagle Cliff Manor in the afternoon. Well, an update tonight on the Montana Relief Fund. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Montana has announced a $100,000 donation. The foundation is part of the Montana Relief Fund, which supports Montanans in need of financial support due to the COVID-19 pandemic. That includes nonprofit organizations. As of today, the Blue Cross Blue Shield grant brings the grand total of our Montana Relief Fund to almost $250,000.
To make sure that seniors and children knew where their next meals were coming from, to make sure that providers had the equipment that they needed to safely treat our patients across the state of Montana. So we just really wanted to be able to invest in the community organizations like the Montana Community Foundation, who are the experts on the front lines of dealing with this pandemic.
Nice. The Montana Supreme Court ruled today that the current rule to counting absentee ballots will stand for the all-mail ballot primary election next week. Now that means to be counted, a ballot must be received at the county election office by 8 p.m. election day next Tuesday. Now the court's 5-2 decision blocks last week's order from a district judge that said ballots need only be postmarked by next Tuesday to be counted. Well, District Judge Don Harris of Billings made his ruling in a lawsuit brought by the Democratic Party groups who said the current deadline can disenfranchise some voters. Secretary of State Corey Stapleton and Attorney General Tim Fox, both Republicans, asked the High Court to block Harris's order and reinstate the current deadline. The High Court majority agreed, saying voter instructions sent with ballots on May 8th are clear. They must be returned by Election Day. The Supreme Court says it will hear an appeal of Harris's order later and decide whether it should stand for the general election. Well, as of Tuesday night, only almost 237,000 Montanans have already submitted their primary election ballots. The election features several high-profile contested party primaries, including for U.S. House, Governor, U.S. Senate, and Attorney General. Well, with 1 week to go until ballots are counted, the race for Montana governor is down to the wire. Both the Republican and Democratic nominations are up for grabs next Tuesday. Well, tonight, Q2's Jay Cohn zeroes in on the race between Whitney Williams and Mike Cooney.
Who are you picking next Tuesday in the Democratic governor's race? Newcomer Whitney Williams or tried and true Mike Cooney? With virtually no public polling in this race, even the experts don't know what to expect.
You know, I absolutely have no clue. I mean, there's been no public polling in that race, so that doesn't give me anything to go by. The only other thing I can look at is the amount of money being spent, which is about equal on both sides.
Both in terms of spending and fundraising, the Cooney-Williams race is tight. And with the Williams camp buoyed recently by a $700,000 ad buy from Emily's List, it's getting tighter.
They dropped $600,000, $700,000, which doesn't sound like a lot of money. We're used to these $50, $60, $70 million Senate races. But in a primary, in a time where media's television ads are still relatively cheap, and there hasn't been a ton of money spent in the primary, it's been about equal, that could maybe put enough of a finger on the scale to help Whitney Williams at the last minute.
Oftentimes you can get a feel for the outcome of a race by looking at fundraising. So here you go, the latest numbers as of mid-May. Williams has raised the most, eclipsing the $1 million mark. But just 30% of that comes from Montana. Half of her dollars come from out of state, as much as 21% from California, 14% from Washington State. And she's chipped in $55,000 of her own money. Mike Cooney has raised over $886,000 as of mid-May, with more than 8,000 separate donations. And when you add in the small non-itemized donations, as much as 3/4 of his cash comes from Montana. He's also getting money from all across the country, with small $5 and $10 donations from nearly every state, thanks to Act Blue, a national Democratic fundraising group. And another wild card this year, the all-mail-in election. And thanks to the pandemic, an evolving campaign face-off on social media.
My daughter, who's 9, plays a lot of games on the internet. She gets Whitney Williams ads a lot. That might show you a little bit that they've maybe done a better job of getting out there. On the other hand, my 9-year-old daughter's not voting.
Tomorrow night, who's winning the Cooney-Williams race in terms of endorsements? In Billings, I'm Jay Cohn reporting for MTN News.
All right, thanks so much, Jay. Now, if you haven't turned in your ballot yet, you have until Election Day next Tuesday to do so. Check for specific details at your local elections office. Well, if you're signed up for jury duty here in Yellowstone County because of COVID-19, you will not be serving out your civic duty at the courthouse. Officials with Yellowstone County District Court say in light of the current pandemic, those serving jury duty will now be selected at Metro Park instead. The arena has a much larger space on the lower level to accommodate social distancing. Also, jury selection will be done in smaller groups, and all parties, including attorneys and prospective jurors, will be required to wear face masks. As you enter Metro Park, you'll likely get a temperature check, and the court will ensure that jurors stay 6 feet away during trial and deliberations. Well, ahead on tonight's 5:30 News, the latest on a major change coming to Montana's medical marijuana system. And also tonight in sports, college football, first preseason rankings are unveiled. Scott shows us where your Cats and Grizz land.
And coming up in weather, our mild May weather continues for a few more days, and then all of a sudden, things really start to cook up this weekend. We'll tell you all about it coming up in just a few more minutes.
You're watching MTN News with Jeanelle Slade and Russ Riesinger. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Green. This is the 5:30 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.